Hey, welcome to this poetry reading. I'm really happy to have my friend and former student Wes Phillips with me. Wes has been writing poetry for about a third of his life, and he is 24 years old. His poetry consists of a bunch of images, which good poetry does. He also writes about loss. He writes about love. He writes about enjoying the world. In this way, sometimes Wes reminds me of Walt Whitman, who is the granddaddy of all American poets. And Wes, I want to present you with this volume of Walt Whitman.
I'm so flattered. Oh wow. You know, this is a lot like the one I read at the library. Green
Good.
Cover and all. So I'm very pleased by that. And it's hard. Well, mostly.
I was wondering if you could open up the tome to where the ribbon's marked and read those lines right there before you get to your own poetry.
These ones here?
Yes.
In the pen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and sun. There are millions of suns left. You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the spectres in books. You shall not look through my eyes either, nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides and filter them from yourself. I have heard that the talkers were talking, the talk of the beginning and the end, but I do not talk of the beginning or the end. There was never any more conception than there is now, nor any more youth or age than there is now, and will never be any more perfection than there is now, nor any more heaven or hell than there is now.
So I'm not trying to give you a reading test right here. However, when you're writing poetry, do you have a gloomy view towards humanity always? Or do you think there's an optimism that rises up for you?
It's both. Balance. There's a balance of it, kind of. Well, it's like a teeter-totter. Sometimes there's more of one than the other. Yes.
So do you limit your feelings in your poems?
Limit.
For example, when I was a little boy and I got angry or sad, my mom would say to me, "Where is the real Warren?" And I wrote a song once called, when I was in third grade, called "Family Fight." And the lyrics went something like, "You can't have a family fight tonight." That was the chorus, I guess. And I talked about how when my sister gets uptight, then my parents fight all night. And my mom hated that song. It was coming out of a 9-year-old mouth. So why don't you limit the emotions that you use in your poetry?
Why don't I limit?
Yeah.
I don't, when it comes to art, believe in limits. Now, preferences, yes.
Yes.
I don't enjoy Game of Thrones. I think they should have limited themselves on a lot of things. I quit after the second season. But as far as art goes, I don't think there are limits to what you are allowed to use.
So tell me, like I mentioned my mom, my culture as well taught me to censor my feelings. When I got married when I was 23, I only had 3 words to describe my emotions. Yeah. Yes, I'm disappointed. I'm happy, but I had no word for sad, disgusted. I had no words to talk about the depths of my emotions.
Right.
I would basically always say, "Oh, I'm okay." With your cultural influences, and maybe you could talk about what they are, do you feel a need to censor yourself like I did as a child?
With my cultural background, rural Christianity, yeah. growing up, now that I think about it. I didn't have a word for depression.
Do you know, in my culture, depression was a sin. It meant that the person had sinned. That's all it meant, is that they needed to repent, and then they would be made better.
I'm not sure that that's the case in mine. I think that it's just, it wasn't recognized, which is kind of ignorant, but I didn't think it was thought possible that Christian kids could be depressed. Or maybe it just wasn't in the training of my family.
Right.
You know, maybe they just didn't know how. Or they might not have known, because I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know how to explain.
So you're saying that you have had depression in the past?
Absolutely. I'm thinking of one specific instance when I walked outside alone by some pressuring force and sat on the back of my dad's truck and watched the moon rise and cried. But had no reason or understanding of why I felt this way. I felt low and lonely.
How old were you?
I think I was 10.
10 years old.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned this is the first time I've actually thought about it in the context of depression. I'm like, oh, wow. Surprising, I had 5 siblings, but felt lonely. That's why it's so... I guess that might have been why it's...
And I come from 10 siblings.
Yeah, like...
9 siblings.
How could you be lonely or depressed? You have...
But I was.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what it was.
It's... I don't remember who said this, but it's the idea of you can feel alone in a crowd.
Absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to hear your poetry.
Great. Funny enough that we started talking about parents, because I excised the one about parents. I'm bringing it back right now.
Good.
Thankfully we have a computer. I'm just going to put it right back in the list. Because now I feel like it's appropriate. So we'll start with that one. And if I recall correctly, I wrote this poem in... It doesn't say. I didn't write it down like an idiot. I think I wrote this in the pattern after another poet.
Okay.
So I used this similar structure. Or it's inspired by another poem, but I'm not sure who. Because I didn't write it down.
And that's all right.
I did on the other projects like that, but not this one. I was kind of foolish. Alright, so it's simply called Parents. This harkens back to my childhood as well. A parental fight or discussion precedes shrieking and thunderbolts piercing plaster, breaking the sound barrier in your bedroom. Sometimes your eyes are blackened by dysfunctional dreams, collateral damage that surgeons can't divorce from your mind like the battlefield ruined legs. These wounds are only curable with kisses like holy water, washing the misshapen vows from your pillow. Sometimes their words are fists bearing bare-knuckled truth that busts your lip. This is so you remember.
Oh boy. So, there's a lot of conflict going on in that poem.
That's the idea. I grew up in a household where Mom and Dad, if you see this, I love you. Where Mom and Dad would get into an argument. Or
a discussion.
They would say, we'd say, why are you fighting? Because it's always openly in the public, like in front of all of us, all 6 of us. And we're like, why are you fighting? And they turn and say, we're not fighting, we're having a discussion. And then go back to yelling at each other.
Now tell me this. As a poet, for you, the word fighting versus the word discussion, do they have 2 different meanings?
Absolutely. Fighting is anything but tame, and discussion is completely tame.
Because I know I met you, I think, when you were 16, is that right?
Yes.
And you didn't always agree with me.
No.
No, you thought I was the devil, probably.
No.
All right. However, even if you didn't think so, I was just like fluffing my resume that way. Did we ever yell at each other?
I don't think so. I don't think we ever have. Except in the context of joking loudly.
Yes. Okay. And from my experience with family dynamics, families are weird. And you're born into it, and that's the normal for you.
Yep.
That's just the normal. So if it was a discussion, how long did it take you to realize that it wasn't a discussion? Did you already know?
I'm pretty sure I didn't believe it from the beginning because they were yelling at each other.
Yes.
Whenever we, as siblings, yelled at each other, it was always called a fight.
Yes.
We could never hide under the guise of it being a discussion.
All right.
Working out our issues. Yeah, we were working out our issues, all right. The only way we knew how.
So it depends on the context, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. What's your next poem?
Woo. following that. Let's see. Let's do. I'm gonna pull up my Ars Poetica poem, "Like a River."
Yes. Before you read it, will you explain what Ars Poetica means?
I'm so glad I looked this up again recently because I had forgotten. I had dumbed it down to simply like what a poem means to the poet, which is part of it, but it's the art of poetry, and that can be universal or personal. Now tell me
before you read it, you said that that last poem that you read was based off of another poet.
I'm fairly certain it was.
Okay.
I know the impetus wasn't.
But tell me, you tend to write in free verse. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Why don't you limit yourself to constructions like sonnets?
So originally, it was because in your class you told us to free ourselves from rhyme. Because I had thought up to that point a poem had to rhyme. But as I started reading more poetry and crafting my own throughout the process, I found out that, first of all, I completely lacked that tradition of, you know, the setup, the form, meter, rhyme, and all that stuff. I had no tradition. I didn't understand it. And to this day, if you ask me to talk to you about, like, tetrameter or something like that, I can't.
Okay.
I really can't specify.
So, for example, a sonnet is very, very structured.
Yes.
A villanelle is even more structured than a sonnet.
Yes.
And you choose to not write that way, not just because your lack of knowledge about it, but why?
This poem might answer your question.
Excellent. Please read.
This is why. So this is "Like a River." Like a river, it takes what form it pleases, carrying with it what it finds. Stick and stone, a waste of people, bark and bias, a corpse afloat on its face. Things that belong and things that don't. Like a river, it carries the toxic sludge of a ruined dream and the mutant hopes of a shattered eggshell, rife with the refuse of new life cut short, stultifying ebb and flow. But the rapids will set your bark to rocking like a bassinet, rattling with laughter in a riot of landlocked waves, juking the knife-edged rocks, startling the sedentary frogs and fishes fighting upstream, and leave you bobbing along with the backs of turtles, heads thrown back in silent joy. The form takes what form it pleases. That's just how it comes out.
Tell me, in that poem, it ends on a very optimistic note.
Yes.
But emotionally speaking, when you talk about the loss of the hope of a shattered egg,
yes.
Could you read that line again?
Yeah, sorry, I just accidentally accepted. Let's see. The line starts here. Like a river, it carries the toxic sludge of a ruined dream and the mutant hopes of a shattered eggshell, rife with the refuse of new life cut short.
What do you mean by that?
On an image level, I just simply mean that I've seen eggshells in a river.
You have?
Yeah. That's all.
Yes, and on a metaphorical level?
On a metaphorical level, the image there is just that, like, life and death are carried on in the river, in poetry and art. That's what the river metaphor stands for, is art or poetry in this instance. It can hold all of those things. It's nuanced. It's more than just happy or sad. It's more than just I'm disappointed. It's many things. That's why it's all cobbled here. You have good things and bad things. Or considerably like stick and stone, you find those in rivers. That's just naturally there. Or a waste of people. And I was thinking of, like tubing, when people just like, all the fat people just bobbing along. I think that's gross. That's why I called them a waste. Bark and bias. Bark, a boat. Archaic term for boat, and then bias, or bark for as in tree bark. You find those bias. That's the wrong opinion or slanted opinion. You find all those things in there.
So when you use the word bark, that's B-A-R-Q-U-E, correct?
I used a more English format with a K.
Oh, you did?
Like bark, because I've seen it spelled both ways in other poems and songs. There's Jefferson Airplane released an album called Bark.
Right.
And I know that if I listening to the album, I can't tell you exactly now, but they meant the boat.
So
B-A-R-K.
So in Latin languages, it's bark.
Yeah.
In Spanish, it's barco. And in English, we've imported that word too. So when you are writing poetry and you come across a word like bark, which could mean a dog barking,
yep.
It could mean a ship,
yep.
It could mean the exterior of a tree. Does that influence your decision?
Yeah. Well, I like archaic language a lot, and I like the way it looks, and I like the ease of which it's spoken and like not rhymed but alliterated. That B sound goes with the bobbing feeling I have when I associate the river concept.
So you're saying that in that poem, that actually the sounds are mimicking the flow of a river?
There's a lot of bubbling or burbling with the B sound in this, yes, and I was trying to kind of keep it along, keep it going along. Like,
okay, good. So just to sum up for me, you're saying that the sounds that you choose in a poem can reflect the setting of the poem itself.
Absolutely, and using phrasing that fits as well as phrasing that doesn't. Like, there's a lot of things that might not. Like, let's see, a concept of a ruined dream in a river. Like, that doesn't, for me, it doesn't fit. At the same time, it kind of does, because it's kind of sandwiched into all this bubbling language.
Tell me, how important are images for you when you write a poem like that? Because that poem is full of imagery.
Paramount.
Why?
Because in order to communicate, you have, like, when we think, we don't think in words. Or at least I don't. I've always thought that we don't, and I've always, like other poets in this class that I wrote this for, we talked about talking in images. So whenever you say something that, like, you say cat, you see a cat. There's not, this is tricky because we talked about bark meaning so many different things, but I like it that you can, it fits. You can fit it or not fit it.
Yes.
It can be tree bark, it can be a boat, it can be a dog barking, but even that, it's for you to figure out the context. The river gives it context, I think.
Yes.
But, like, speaking in images, in order to properly communicate, you have to say something that someone else can actually associate that they've seen.
Okay.
So
you're talking about prior to written language, in a way, that as Homo sapiens, we think in images and our experiences.
Yes.
And because of that, to make an effective poem, you don't just say, poetry is a river. Thank you very much. You are actually giving more images to back up that overriding metaphor.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I mean, in more than just in the body of water, rivers, and ecosystem, there's a lot going on there. And I don't like going to the river, personally. I like the ocean better. I'll say that. But
why is that?
I just like I mean, first of all, it's good for my skin. I have eczema. Good for my breathing. I have asthma. It's just, there's so much going on, and the expanse of it is great. And in Florida, you don't get a lot of expanse because it's all trees, which I love trees. But when you go to the ocean, it's like meeting something much bigger.
How does it make you feel when you see the ocean?
Nostalgic for the times I went as a kid, and nostalgic for exploration times, like colonial, like intrepid exploration, whenever it was all new and you're just setting out on this crazy expanse and not knowing when you're going to hit land or where it is. That kind of feeling comes on me. That's what I think of.
The first time I saw the ocean, I was in 3rd grade. My family, we took a trip to San Francisco where my oldest sister was at, supporting her husband through medical school, and she was running an entire tower of condominiums. And that's how she made her money, because he couldn't make money while he was in school. And we went to the ocean, and I'd never seen anything so much bigger than myself in my entire life.
Right.
It made me feel so small. Now, when you're at a river, you like rivers over oceans?
No, oceans over rivers.
Oceans over rivers. When you're at a river, you watch them, though. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always looking for the turtles bobbing. That's my favorite thing to see. Or alligators. Lucky if you see one of those. I've only seen a few in my life, so they're not always easy to spot, but interesting. Those are the things I like, the wildlife.
Okay, we're going to end this part 1 for a second and come back with some more of Wes. Could you hit the space bar?